Greetings lore seekers and welcome to another episode of the Lost Archives. This week I'm going to be talking about the Jensaarai, an order of Force users that arose during the Clone Wars from many Jedi, Padawans and a couple of Knights who believed that the Jedi stole everything they knew from the Sith Order. In fact, the name Jensaarai is a Sith word which actually means hidden follower of the truth. Our story begins in a library of all places. Nikos Tiris, a Jedi Knight who's searching through the Jedi archives in the temple, came across a manuscript that seemed to be of ancient Sith origin. It was the philosophy musing of a Sith Lord known as Noon, hence why the text is known as Noon's Philosophy. Now, this text went through the various bits and pieces of the Dark Jedi lore as they were exiled from the Jedi Order, the birth of the Sith and the ancient Sith Wars, as well as a great deal of the Sith lore and many other bits as well. One crucial difference though that would prove to be the cause of the schism between the Jensaarai and the Jedi Order is that the manuscript claimed that everything the Jedi knew they got from the Dark Jedi and then exiled them. Despite the obvious suspicious authenticity of the text, Tiris kind of took this as gospel truth, and so himself, several other knights that he'd convinced, and many Padawans immediately turned their back on the Order and left the Jedi Temple. This is when he dubbed his group the Jensaarai, meaning hidden followers of the truth. So they leave and they travel quite far from Coruscant until they get to the planet Susevi, a planet located in the Swabi system, which if I remember correctly is a planet located on the Outer Rim. Though I do have to question that, once again, the Jedi's lack of a safeguarding procedure meant that a lot of Padawans and Knights seemingly disappeared out of nowhere. If they did have one though, they'd probably be going white as a sheep at this point, regardless of their colour. Anyway, back on track. So once they arrived on the planet, they would build themselves a makeshift base for training, and they would begin constructing armour, and Nikos would begin teaching them a combination of both Sith and Jedi traditions. Now, what he didn't realise at this point is that the manuscript was actually corrupting him, and he was walking down the path towards the dark side. And because of how those teachings were going, he was also turning his students to the dark side, all the while believing that they were secret teachings of the true Jedi, when really it was unknowingly changing them onto the ways of the dark and imparting the secrets of the Sith. It was around this time that Count Dooku revealed himself as a Sith Lord, and the Clone Wars really kicked off in full. And so the Jedi Council, in a panic to try and find out who the second Sith Lord was, realising Dooku hadn't been the Sith the entire time and some of his own machinations with Obi-Wan, they formed many teams of Jedi investigators to go around and look for signs of Sith cultists, any followers of the dark side, or anyone who seems to be not up to snuff and doing things that the Jedi would consider dodgy. Grey Jedi, watch out, is all I'll say on that one. But yes, a particular trio of Jedi investigators was sent to this world that the Jensaarai were on, coming across Nikos and two of his fellow knights. The Jedi investigators were shocked that former knights could so easily have become followers of the dark side. Realising that they couldn't redeem them, decided that the best way would be to eliminate them as a threat to the Black Republic. So they engage in a duel which claims the lives of Nikos and the two other Jensaarai. The death of one of the Jedis as well. In fact, as the Jedi with her dying breath, she picks up the Jensaarai and throws them back into their base, and then the subsequent release of dark side energy as the three of them die causes part of the building to collapse. And the two remaining Jedi who are left alive think, okay, alright, we've killed them, we've done our job, let's leave. not realising that the bulk of the Jensaarai composed more than 3 knight equivalent warriors. The rest of them were hiding their force power inside the base and waiting to surprise the Jedi, but seeing as the entrance had collapsed, they couldn't spring out and deal out justice for their fallen comrades. By the time they were able to excavate themselves from the base, the Jedi had long since departed. In the aftermath, they buried their dead and formed a new tradition which would band them all together. One of the wives of one of the fallen apprentices took the title of Sarate Ka, which essentially meant Keeper of the Hidden Truth or Guardian of the Hidden Truth. And so, during the remainder of the Clone Wars, the Jensaarai kept to themselves, continued training, and mostly tried to stay off the radar. This all changed due to one fateful day. With the declaration of the New Order and the execution of Order 66, the Jensaarai thought themselves to be liberated from the tyranny of the Jedi, and in fact wanted to help the Empire hunt down the remainder of the Jedi Knights. To aid in this effort, the Sarate Ka sent her own son to personally assist Darth Vader in hunting down the Jedi. Now initially they accepted this due to anyone wanting to be useful to Palpatine's needs and uses would be accepted. But Vader, sensing only the light side of the Force from the boy, cut him down where he stood and dispatched Inquisitors and various Jedi hunters to the planet. Many Jensaarai were caught and killed and executed, or even just outright executed by these Inquisitors and Jedi hunters, and the Empire made its presence felt on the planet. This sent one shocking message to any other Force group in the galaxy at the time. Emperor Palpatine would not tolerate any other Force users that would not serve his needs. This would have an effect on certain Force groups like the Barandu Sages, which they'll be getting their own video, and covering the various fallacies and ways they tried to ensure the survival of their group, thanks to what Palpatine had done. Anyway, back on topic. Like the Jedi before them, Emperor Palpatine and the Empire's agents made one fatal mistake. They thought they'd wiped out the Jensaarai, but what they'd in turn done is only dealt with a small number of them. And so once these people had been dealt with, they'd thought that that's it, that's all of them, we're going to leave. And so the Empire's Inquisitors and their hunters left an Imperial Governor in place on the planet, thinking all was good. The Jensaarai, however, this time were not sealed in their bunker, so they would enact personal justice on their prosecutors, and after a few years they would periodically emerge in small groups or as individuals to conduct raids and ambushes on Imperial garrisons, and various other things. This did mean that at some point certain members of the Jensaarai would be killed or captured during the fighting, but this didn't prompt any new wave of any Jedi hunters. The reason being is that Palpatine may have realised that the Jensaarai had no interest in helping the Jedi-orientated Rebel Alliance, and so there were really little danger to him while he was busy dealing with the rebels and the various Jedi groups that propped up around them. So he was content just to let them be a nuisance to the local Imperial Governor and be done with them. Then came the fateful day of both the death of Palpatine and Darth Vader at the Battle of Endor. The Jensaarai knew it was only a matter of time till the Empire fell and they would be free. Now, there was one particular Moff who heard rumours of powerful Force users on their home planet, and so, now leading a pirate gang of her own, went to execute the Imperial Governor and then send a false message to the Jensaarai that they were now free from oppression and persecution. After making contact with the pirate leader, they made the mistake of believing her that they'd be their liberator. In truth, they merely wanted to be used as a base of operations, and she wanted the Jensaarai to hunt down Jedi Knight Corran Horr, who was currently persecuting the pirate leader because she had kidnapped his wife Mirax. So, following this, the Jensaarai would leave their planet for the first time in decades to go and fight Corran. They'd ambushed the young Jedi, well, say young. He's young in the ways of the Force. He's quite a veteran man at this point in the Rebel Alliance. They start beating down on Corran, and they are on the verge of winning when Luke arrives, and between the two of them, they're able to defeat the Jensaarai, capture them, and then question them, and they are shocked to learn of their existence and their warped philosophy in the ways of the Jedi. So much so, in fact, that they have switched the positions of Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi on the Death Star, seeing as Obi-Wan as a monster and Vader as a tragic sacrificial figure. Twisted dogma thought we all know. But hey, that was the way of what the manuscript that originally set out their beliefs started them on, so it's not surprising. Luke and Corran, working in conjunction with the New Republic, will track down the pirate base and confront the Jensaarai, firstly dealing with the pirates so Luke could talk to them and duel with them. Now the Sardaukar wouldn't back down without a fight, so they fought, were defeated, and then were really surprised that Luke just didn't execute them outright. And Luke was trying to explain to them how they'd gotten their facts wrong, which they initially refused to believe until the Kamas senator kind of explained stuff to them that the Jedi then managed to defuse the situation, and an understanding was eventually brought together. It was shortly before this that some of the Jensaarai had really started to notice the cracks in their own philosophy, and with this resolution with the Jedi they were able to correct a lot of the mistakes using a lot of reforms in their teachings, and started a sort of tie with Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy. Now Luke was able to convince them, saying that, look, I am the teaching of one Jedi tradition. My friend Kyle Katarn here is the teaching of another. Perhaps you guys are the third way. So why not all of us work together, weave together, and become stronger so we might never be torn apart again? Now, this relationship at the start was tedious at best, but over time it grew much, much stronger, to the point where the Jensaarai eventually agreed to send students to the Academy on Yavin 4 to be trained in the ways of the Force, still retaining their Jensaarai nature though. This also gave the benefit of giving Luke various access to the practices of the old Jedi Order, until eventually the Jensaarai and the new Jedi Order became quite close allies, helping them in such incidents like the Yuuzhan Vong War or various other incidents. But enough about their background and their history. It's time to move on to their philosophy, their abilities, and the various practices which they would unfold, which, from what we've already gone through, is going to be a mix of both Jedi and Sith philosophies. Which, firstly, considering the mix of their memberships varying sides of the Force, they would be most certainly could be considered grey if they'd had a much better introduction to the original Jedi Order, instead of the massacre of their 3 top knights. In their first incarnation, they were heavily influenced by the dark side of the Force manuscripts that they had in their possession, which was leading them down a very, very dark path. Now, with the destruction of them and their leader, the second leader had not been fully taught the Sith teachings, since they were free from the corruption that the manuscript was bringing on. This led to a few training reforms in the Jensaarai. This meant that most of them would have a grey to light Force orientation going forward. However, they did have the knowledge to create cortosis armour from any deposits they found on the planet, and an influence for their specialised armour, which would be similarly created to the Jedi Order's lightsabers. The lightsaber in the Jensaarai was created much, much earlier on during your training, and wasn't seen as important as it is in the Jedi Order. Now, the rite of passage for a Jensaarai is the creation of their specialised armour. It takes as much dedication as building your lightsaber, and as much time. Now, what you'd start off with is a basic frame, and then you would go on to customise the armour to how you want it, usually reflecting a creature that can defend itself, like a sand panther or a reek. Creatures that were known to be herbivorous and not overly aggressive and I suppose in the case of the Reek, if you've watched Attack of the Clones, that creature can be aggressively in nature, but I think that might be due to the fact that the Geonosians had deliberately bred it to be that way. But yes, anyway, back to the armour. It would be designed around the creature, and so it would take on like the features of the creature. So you'd get, I'm going to bring up an image actually of the armour. So you've got this one here which has the horns of a Reek on it. It is red in coloration, and yeah, it is based off ancient Sith designs as well. One of the few things they did keep from the manuscript before it was destroyed by the Jedi. And so you'd customise this armour how you want it to be tailored to the wearer. So very much it is the symbol of identity of this Jensaarai, very much as the lightsaber is a symbol of the Jedi who wields it. They would go on further to alter the armour to give them, say, what abilities akin to the creatures their armour represents. So you could have binoculars that would increase your sight and vision, or you could have retractable claws, like a sand panther. These obviously were used in defence, but they could also be used as quite aggressive weapons if the user would succumb to the dark side. This essentially would represent the Jensaarai's version of apprentice to full knight. So whereas they'd create their lightsaber around the time they'd be a Padawan, they'd then eventually, well, before then, because the Jedi create Padawans, original lightsabers. Yeah. Anyway, this would be their version of the mark of showing that you are now a full knight. That does lead me on to their version of the ranks. They didn't have Padawans, knights and masters. They had apprentices, defenders, and the Saraka, who was the de facto leader of the Jensaarai. Though that being said, they could only really be one leader, so the term defenders was used for both knights and master. The main real change from this would be something known as ring defenders, which was essentially similar to the Jedi Starfighter Corps that was used to defend the planet from pirates and other fleeing criminals. Another rank being shield defenders, which was to act as secretaries, assistants and bodyguards for the Saraka. Now the issue with the Saraka is there's only really been two known individuals to be of that rank. Nikos for one, and the unnamed wife of one of his fellow defenders who fell against the Jedi, who currently had no successor and no one would know who the next one would be. So this could potentially cause a bit of a problem and infighting if the Saraka was suddenly to be killed. Anyway, moving on, I'm just going to quickly explain a little bit more about the armour. So it is designed off Sith battle armour, and it is meant to be a highly flexible piece of light armour covered in cortosis fibres. Now, since this isn't pure stained cortosis, it will only really defend against lightsaber attacks. It won't be able to short out the blade if it hits it, which would make it useful for sparring practice, and also perfect defense against any lightsaber wielding opponents, as well as any energy weapons, considering the energy absorbing potential of cortosis. As stated before, it is usually based off an animal that the wearer could relate to, though it's not a rule. It was common practice for it to be styled on animals that were not overly aggressive but were capable of defending themselves. Anyway guys, this has just been a brief overview on the Jensaarai and their various teachings and beliefs in the Force. I may go, if I can find a bit more information on it, into the specific in-depth details on how their teachings would differentiate from the Jedi in their two incarnations. As always, you can find my sources in the description below, as well as any images and music I use from my videos. If you like what you heard, please feel free to subscribe to the channel and check the bell for notifications so you can stay up to date, and perhaps maybe leave me a like or a comment, as this will help out the channel a great deal, especially if there's any constructive criticism below. That'll help out what I'm doing quite a bit. And on that note, I will see you all on the next episode of The Lost Archives. Take care, Lore Seekers, and have a good day.